Good morning, and thank you once again for joining me on the conversation with Kelly Diamond. You can catch me every Thursday at 9:30 Eastern Time AM and 6:30 AM Eastern Western Time, Pacific Time, uh, as well as my written word every Monday at globalwealthprotection.com. So obviously, I can't let it go. We are going to be talking about, well, at least I will be talking about Chris Kyle. And I, in no way, shape, or form, will claim that the next 30 minutes will be even remotely civil. So if you want to turn it off, feel free. Anyway, God, where to begin with that? There's a part of me that feels like I shouldn't even belong to any of these political discussion groups because it's really just not good for my blood pressure. Listening, or rather reading, some of the commentary that people have about Chris Kyle is so disheartening to think that a man who, outside the context of war and government, is a serial killer. Right? If you remove the government, right, and say, well, he was working for the U.S. government, he was working for the U.S. military under their orders. Okay, well, if I remove the government, then what does he become? He becomes a serial killer, is what he becomes. He's killed over 100 people. He claims, and he boasts about the fact that he's killed over 100 people. I remember there being some serial killer up in Michigan who was, God, I wish I could remember his name because it just hit me, this interview. He was in an interrogation room and they had asked him, they had all these unclosed cases. And they said, they caught him on the one. Okay, they caught him on one murder. So he was going away for the one murder. So basically what they did was they gave him clemency, or they gave him immunity against all the other things if he was willing to help them close these cases. Well, before he ever admitted to anything and actually, claimed names and victims, he looked around the room. There had to have been at least 10 or 15 people in the room. He says, I've killed more people than there are fingers and toes in this room. And according to those who were in the room, he said it so matter-of-factly. And I feel like Chris Kyle isn't too far from that. Now, the fact that he was given a legal or justified context under which to take these lives doesn't make him any less of a serial killer. Now, if we put the government back in, right, we already said that if we took the government out of the context of his job, then he's a serial killer. He's a cold-blooded serial killer. Bigoted one at that, because he specifically profiled people in Iraq, okay, in war-torn areas. But let's put the government back in, okay? And let's say that because the government has this magical ability to make everything legitimate, when I speed, I'm a danger. I need to be cited. I need to be pulled over, and I need to be extorted for money. But when a cop does it, he's protecting their safety. You know why? Because he's magically immune to all the rules that apply to civilians. Same is true for anything else, right? The serial killer all of a sudden becomes an inspirational hero. People begin to praise and clamor over him because it's magical. The government has been reintroduced into the context of his job, and now he's praiseworthy. He's a hero. Okay. Some people will even say, well, I wouldn't say he's heroic, but certainly is an inspiration. Oh. Okay. Well, he went from serial killer to mercenary for hire. And the fact that it was that we want to call that a legitimate business interaction or business exchange simply because the government was the one doing the hiring doesn't change who he is. Okay, he just went from serial killer to mercenary for hire. I don't know if that was necessarily much more than a lateral move in terms of praiseworthiness, noteworthiness. Okay. At no point have I ever heard anybody tell me that Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer or Charles Manson should get a high five for doing their job. Now, let's be very clear, okay? Because let's face it, what good is a political argument without injecting Hitler, right? You have to have Hitler in here somewhere, and I will introduce Hitler into this because hey, that's part of discussing politics. If you can't, if there's always like 2 degrees of separation between any political discussion and Hitler, and I will show you how that's true. Hitler did not kill as many people as Chris Kyle did by himself. Hitler hired people like Chris Kyle to do his dirty work. Okay? There you go. There's your 2 degrees of Hitler. But what does it take to do that job? What sort of psychological acrobatics do you reckon it takes to be able to not only do that job, but pound your chest afterwards and write memoirs about it? Go sit on fucking Conan and extol the virtues of his job. Okay, it's on Conan, 2.5 of which were Conan himself talking. So 2.5 minutes on the Conan O'Brien show to talk about his book. And, he was somewhat self-deprecating, and humble. I'm just a monkey with a gun. On a good day, okay, most monkeys wouldn't go out and practice killing. Back a fucking lunch and go practice killing people. You can't inject that kind of malice. Now, speaking of malice, right, we've had this discussion before under different circumstances, but what is murder? Murder is the taking of a life with malice and foresight. The premeditated taking of life with malice and foresight, and I'll be damned if he didn't have any of those ingredients in his career. I got into a discussion first, but okay, so we'll get into what I discussed later. I have a few minutes, but I want to get back to what it psychologically takes to take a life, much less take multiple lives. Multiple lives now, this is a big deal. You have crimes of passion. Right? Crimes of passion are one-offs, really. Person finally becomes unhinged. He takes the life of a specific person for a specific reason, pushed them to a point, and they needed to go. But even then, it would be microcosmic. What does it take for a human being of, assuming they're not fucked up, right? Because the alternative is that you're just a complete sociopath. But let's assume he's not a sociopath. I'm willing to go there. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, no, he's not a sociopath. He's of sound mind. He was of sound mind. But what would it take for a person of sound mind to take a life? What sort of psychological acrobatics do you have to go through? Well, I'll tell you. Historically, we have to convince ourselves that the life being taken is undeserving of that life, right? And then we have to say, well, they're undeserving because why? Because they cease to be human. They're no longer human. I cannot view you as equal to me. If you're me, I'm killing myself, and I cannot do that. So I must believe that you are subhuman in some way, inferior to me. Now, I don't care how you define it, how you go about doing that. If you want to say that the actions of that person make them inferior to you because they made decisions that demonstrate that they are an inferior life, you can do that. It would be irrational, but you can. And people do. Right? But you first have to believe that they're less human in some way, or not human at all. Here's an example. Black people in the United States at one point were 3/5 of a human being, 3/5 of a man. There were enough of a man to vote, but not enough of a man to count as a whole person. And certainly not enough of a man to be anything more than a second-class citizen or slave, an indentured servant, one that could easily just be beaten or lynched, on the whims of their masters. That's what 3/5 of a man equates to, an overt chattel slave, expendable, but taking mostly human form. That's what black men were at one point in the United States. Hitler, my boy, gonna bring him back in. Hitler and his cohorts believed that Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, and the mentally retarded were subhuman. Homosexuals and mentally retarded basically being dysfunctional or faulty human beings. They weren't whole. The Jews certainly were subhuman. And they wanted to put a science to it. They wanted to ascribe some scientific rationale as to why the Jew was inferior to the Aryan. But indeed, first and foremost, they believed their conclusion was a foregone conclusion. First and foremost, the Jew is inferior. Now we're going to come up with evidence as to why. Right? But that was Hitler. Oh yeah, I can exterminate them. They're not human. It would be no different than killing a rat. Any other vermin, pest. I'm sure the same was true for Mao and Pol Pot, Stalin. They weren't peers. They can't be. A person on trial for murder, capital crime, where the stakes are the death penalty or life imprisonment. The prosecution will never use the word man or person or woman. There will be absolutely no language of that sort alluding to the idea that the person they're trying to put to death is in fact a person. Here are some words you might hear. This monster, this depraved thing, cold-blooded murderer. I don't ever need to touch the word human or even allude to it. The entire time the prosecution will not use words that allude to that person being human for a reason, because the jury cannot believe that they are human to take their life. And what does the defense do? The defense does everything they can to humanize the person. This person is someone's child, son, daughter, mother, wife at one point, maybe. They're a victim of circumstance, of their circumstances. Okay? You understand how dehumanizing it must be to take a human life in cold blood without question. And then our military is likewise geared to do the same. They are nameless, faceless people. The moment I convince you that the person you're going to kill is just you with brown skin, shit gets very difficult. You hesitate. People will hesitate once it hits them that perhaps that is a human being they're taking, a peer, an equal, a life of equal value. And so, how does Chris Kyle manage to reconcile his job as sniper? He's going to go kill them. If they're there and they retaliate, they're bad. That's it. No trial. We don't actually know. Here, give me a fucking list of names that he killed, along with what he knew they were guilty of. But understand, if you're going to come into my house and I pick up a gun to fight you and get you out, I'm not the bad guy. I'm on defense. The person who comes into your house is on offense. So then, now we can get to the discussions that I've had on Facebook. Everything from, how dare you criticize a hero while you sit there and enjoy your safety and freedom. Now that unto itself is absolutely laughable. Safety and freedom, my ass. I sit here living in the age of the Patriot Act, NDAA, NSA spying, a growing police state where fucking Mayberry has a goddamn MRAT and Bearcat. In escalated numbers of police brutality, free speech zones, heightened regulations on gun ownership, sobriety checkpoints, and you're going to tell me about my freedom? If you can count them on one finger, I'd love to know what they are. Protecting my freedom's my ass. You didn't protect shit. I'm sorry. I would be happy to thank you for protecting my freedoms, if in fact you did. Here, let me give you an example of someone who did, or at least someone who made the attempt. I'll give you two names, matter of fact. Bradley Manning and Edward Snowden. Now there's two American heroes. If you want to call it, if we need to have American heroes, by golly, there you go. And you know what? The person who hails Chris Kyle as a hero and inspiration will see Bradley Manning and Edward Snowden as nothing more than traitors for exposing the betrayal of our government, the lies of our government, right? They're not heroic for exposing our government for what it really is. They're traitors. But the mercenary for hire, he's a heroic inspiration. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your fucking service. What other occupation gets such unquestioning praise? Thank you for your service. Man, I don't even know what you fucking did. You could have peeled potatoes for your entire fucking tour. But thank you for your service. Herpaderp. The whole military goes unquestioning. Right? It is unquestioned. It is above reproach, this entity. Everybody that works for it is thanked for their service. And everybody that works for it does their job without question. There's no questioning the fucking DOD. Where's my fucking thanks? I'm an assistant media buyer. I do my job. I do it quite well, I might add. I actually do my job well. I can actually tell you that it's not that I just do the job. It's not fucking PE class where I just show the fuck up. I actually do the work and I do it well. Where's my fucking thanks? Where's my fucking ticker tape parade? There isn't one, because doing your fucking job is doing your fucking job. It's not praiseworthy. Hey, I woke up today. Okay, well, unless you have terminal cancer, that is no accomplishment. That's about as much of an accomplishment as knocking somebody up. My dad used to expect praise and respect for knocking my mom up. I'm like, what the fuck, tab A and the slut B, and all of a sudden you're deserving of a lifetime of fucking praise and respect because you have the title of dad? And the same is true with the military. I showed up. I don't have flat feet and I don't wear glasses. I'm willing to hold a gun. Well, fucking congratulations. Thank you for your service. And all of a sudden, you put on this fucking magic costume over here, and now you become this amazing hero, and you walk down the street wearing this shit, and people are like, oh, thank you for your service. No. Thank Kelly. Thank Kelly for her service. It's Kelly's private sector dollars that fits the bill for these welfare whores. They're not producers. You tell me if you don't like it, leave. If I fucking left, if everybody like me fucking left, who the fuck's gonna cut the check for these assholes? Jesus Christ. I'm perfectly willing to come after the liberal and the conservative alike. Okay? Even the liberals who actually sit there and support their troops unquestioningly, it's not their fault. They're just pawns. It's the government's fault. Well, without the fucking government, these people are criminals, cold-blooded fucking criminals. The only thing that keeps them from being criminals at least on paper, not to me, but at least on paper, is the fact that the government was involved. If the government wasn't involved, they would just be flat out cold-blooded murderers. So in as much as you want to take the government out of the equation, they need it. It saves their ass. The government, once again, masquerading as its own fucking cure, being the cancer that it is, got you involved in some bullshit in the Middle East, and now it's going to bail you out. You can't pick and choose. You can't cherry pick. And you sure as fuck can't go and commit the crimes that the government asks you to commit and then expect to divorce yourself from it. You need it for everything you do to not be criminal, but instead for it to be heroic, so that you can walk freely. But for the government, you wouldn't have killed, and but for the government, you wouldn't be a killer. But yet here you are, military. Expecting thanks, respect. It's not my fault. Oh, well, isn't that a typical government response? In addition to the fact that we have a double standard linguistically and semantically for the actions taken under the auspice of government, under the guise of government, under the cover of government, right? In addition to these linguistic double standards, just in case you're also absolved from anything that you do, well, in the private sector, you sack of shit, when the person who hires you to kill for them is as equally culpable as the person who fucking pulls the trigger. So when somebody says somebody in the military is a coward, they in fact are, because they don't have to own their actions. If a person had to own their actions, especially someone like Chris Kyle, if he had to go on trial for every life that he took, I don't know if he would be as cavalier as he was on Conan O'Brien. There is no way around the discussion of whether or not Chris Kyle was anything more than a psychopathic, or at least sociopathic, serial killer. The fact is that, I mean, here's the thing. Charming as he could be, charming as he might have been in his interviews, charming as he might have been as an everyday person, okay, has nothing to do with it. Charm and charisma, integrating yourself into society, is what serial killers do. You seem to expect that the serial killer is sitting there gnawing off his own fucking arm while reciting the alphabet backwards. No. That dude has a regular job. Probably has a family. And it has a woodshed where they keep their memoirs and fucking trophies. Okay? That's how it goes. It's not about how he presented himself to everybody else. And I'm tired of hearing people tell me about how grateful I should be if you don't like it, leave. Nobody, no one has been able to show me so much as a correlation, never mind causation, but at least a correlation between my dwindling and remaining liberties and a war that we had. Not one. And of course, we have to deflect the whole discussion, right? Let's make it about Kelly being an anarchist. It has absolutely nothing to do with me being an anarchist. This discussion has absolutely nothing to do with anarchism. You can be a full-blown statist and still believe that war is wrong. Of course, the statists will I mean, you're going to be the typical liberal, right? You're going to be, I'm going to still vote, and I'm still going to have my, my party, and I'm going to have my, my ideologies, and I'm still going to want to control people through laws and stuff like that. And you can still have all that and still believe that war is wrong. The delusional part is that you can't have, the warfare state and the welfare state are inextricably linked. Okay. That's a delusion that statists don't quite get, that Republicans and Democrats don't seem to fully understand or wrap their head around. That there is an inextricable link between welfare and warfare states. And no clearer has that ever been illustrated than World War II. Anywhere in the world, Japan, Germany, United States, without World War II, World War II was basically born out of World War I. World War I was born out of economic depression. When there's depression, in comes the state with all of its fucking programs, ushered in by none other than our own FBI. So there is no, they're inextricably linked. But nonetheless, you can be a statist and be anti-war. You can believe that war is wrong. Okay, so this has nothing to do with being an anarchist. Ron Paul served as a House representative, and he was against foreign interventions and entanglements. So you can be a sadist and be against the law. It has nothing to do with my anarchy. It's the irrational. What gets me to what anarchy is only the natural conclusion, the logical end to honestly observing the folly of government, right? And accepting the fact that it is absolutely irrational in its existence and what it does. But you first have to be intellectually honest enough to say, oh, well, I was offering linguistic double standards to anybody who did something under the cloak of government. Criminal double standards. Whereas it is criminal for anybody in the private sector to do this, if you're in the public sector and you've done it at the behest of the government, then it's sanctioned and it's acceptable, justified, and in fact, heroic. There is no other occupation other than in the military where people just blindly thank you for doing what you do. Never once thinking, did they even do a good job? Better still, what the fuck did you do? Do you say thank you for your service to the person who dropped drones on children in schools in Pakistan? Do you still offer that same thanks? Because that person is still walking around among you. I was told that Chris Kyle did what he did because no one else could. Man, I wish I could be so fucking optimistic as to believe something like that. Honestly. I should hope the fuck nobody else could. Blindly, unquestioningly take over 100 lives with their own firearms. Imagine if an Iraqi were to come to the United States and do what Chris Kyle did. And imagine if the frenzy back in Iraq was that of what we have here in the United States. And let's say they made a movie about the motherfucker. And the motherfucker wrote a goddamn book. And he gets out of this talk show and promotes his book. And he's hailed as a fucking hero. How exactly would the United States perceive him? Would they still think he was heroic? Would they still think he was noble? Amazing how it's only noble and it's only commendable not when you serve a government, but when you serve your team's government. We were on the offense. Chris Kyle was playing for the offense. And the only way people can wrap their heads around how many people he's killed is by, one, believing that every single life he took deserved to be taken, that they were, by default, of some sort of guilty disposition, or B, that they were subhuman anyway and undeserving of life. They have no idea who these people are. They have no file or dossier on them to know if they are in fact bad people, dangerous people. They have no idea. He didn't know. He was guessing. There is no excuse for heralding this man as anything of worthy of praise. How backwards is our fucking society that we would call the person, the Paul Revere's of our time, right? The Edward Snowdens, the fucking whistleblowers, these guys, these messengers, we would call them traitors and condemn them. Bradley Manning is condemned for what he did, despite the fact that he was right and the government was wrong. We still condemn it. He did nothing to harm anybody. He didn't kill one single person. Edward Snowden has never killed a single human being, has never taken a human life, but he's considered a traitor. But Chris Kyle, a serial killer for hire, is a hero. I would tap on that moral compass to check to see if it knows what true north is, because honestly, it's broken. The moral compass is broken. If that's where our fucking priorities are, if that's where our values are. Well, have a great week. Talk to you next time. Bye.